because of me, and I had a meeting with Hasbro, and they, because of what I told them, they were interested in having us do G.I. Joe.
Right.
And so I gave them a few ideas, and then I went back to the office and turned it over to Larry Hama, who did almost all of it.
Right.
And did a great job. So we have this book in the works, and we used to, I don't know if you remember this, we used to have these distributor meetings.
Oh, I
where
remember.
We would fly into the distributors.
Yep.
On Marvel's dime to some location. One was in Chicago.
One was in Dallas.
One was in Dallas. One was in Florida.
Yep.
This is the one in Florida is what I'm talking about.
Yep.
And there were a couple others.
That's where Carol got robbed.
Yeah. Anyway, that was this was Carol was brought later. She wasn't there.
Yeah.
But at any rate, so we're having this meeting. We had all, I don't know how many there were at that particular moment. Whatever was left of the 18 were there, and it was, I think, maybe Orlando or someplace. We had this meeting, and so okay, we talk about, well, how can we help you? What can we do? What should be different? What do we change? And getting everybody talking, trying to get all the distributors on the same page.
Yes.
For one thing. And then, of course, we would take the opportunity to pitch to them about upcoming stuff. And I did most of the pitching, and I told them we were doing this new book called G.I. Joe, that was based on a Hasbro toy. I got booed off the stage.
I was one of the booers.
Yeah, you were one of the booers. I got booed off the stage. Mike Hobson and I said, you guys have got to have this. Every kid in America is going to know who G.I. Joe is.
Yep.
You need this book.
Yep.
And so nobody wanted it. No, we don't want it. It's war books. War doesn't sell. And so Mike and I talked, and we decided to offer it returnable. The first direct market comic book that was offered returnable. Just order as many as you want, take them, don't sell them, send them back. Okay?
Yep.
And so it was the first book, and the end of the sales part is that what a typical Marvel in those days, first issue of a typical Marvel direct would sell between 300,000 and 500,000 copies. Just direct. With a returnable book, the direct market ordered 100,000. Okay, maybe very low orders. The day that book hit the stands, the phones were ringing all day. People want more, want more, want more.
Yep.
And of course, the next couple issues had already been ordered, so we had to do reorders on all of them even before the book was printed.
Yep.
And so it was a big hit. Well, in that little time period between the distributors meeting and when the book finally went on sale, it came out that Mike Friedrich had been actively going to distributors and the direct market in general and telling them not to buy it, saying it sucked and it's evil and why don't you buy his graphic novel instead, which was Michael Moorcock thing.
The Elric Dreaming City.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, and he was literally saying, order more of my book, it's going to be great, don't buy G.I. Joe, which is not, you don't want your sales guy doing that,
True.
And as a matter of fact, to this day, if you say Mike Friedrich's name anywhere near Larry Hama, he will growl. Oh yeah, he's not happy. And so when that came out, when that came to light, that was really bad. I mean, he was going to go either way. He was going to be fired, or somehow gotten rid of, forced to leave, whatever, and or what really happened, which is what you said.
Yeah.
Which he realized that it wasn't so good at Marvel anymore, and he better leave. So he quit on his own.
He did, and it really, he and I have had this discussion, and yeah, he had an antipathy toward that book, but his real thing was that he didn't want to be on the East Coast forever and a day. He was a Bay Area guy. He wanted to go back.
I agree with you. I think this was he saw this as a temporary gig from the beginning, but I'm telling you, it came to a point where he was going to go one way or the other.
Well, sure. Yeah. And, I was at that point more adamantly anti-war even than I am today.
Yeah.
And
that's why we tried to make it all about anti-terrorist.
Yeah.
That's why we try to make it, no, when there's a terrorist crisis, you call in G.I. Joe.
Yeah, but you know, you had guys that were there that were smarter than me, and I'll give Steve Milo credit here.
Okay.
Steve Milo, in those days, he had American Entertainment. Later it morphed into another name, I can't remember. But anyway, he bought every one of those that he could get his hands on and made a fortune with them. And then he did the same thing later on with Transformers.
Yeah.
And you know, he later made some disastrously bad decisions, but early on,
Yeah.
he picked some winners, and I'm more than willing to admit that G.I. Joe was not one that I picked.
No, it did tremendously well, and Larry did a great job on it. It was always a big seller. And then I guess IDW has now picked it up, and they're doing it.
They were doing it for a while. I'm
Were
not
they?
sure where it is right now. Because
Well, I know Larry's still writing it.
Yeah, I don't
these
keep
years
track
later.
of these things.
All these years later.
I just know that you know, the 155 issue run that it did was phenomenally successful. And then this is something that I think a lot of the folks watching this would be very interested to know. Do you have any idea when they were doing the reprintings that were being done, and they were marked second printing, third printing, fourth printing, do you know how those print runs compared to the original print runs?
I know that the first one was several times, I'm not going to put a number on it, but several times larger than the original print run. The original print run was 100,000 for direct, and I think we printed, we knew it was going to be big, so I think we printed something like 300,000 or 400,000, somewhere in between there, for the newsstand.
Yeah.
Okay, and all the other associated, the Whitmans, all that would be in that number. So there were a lot of them out there, but when we went back to press, it was almost entirely for the direct market. The newsstand never reordered anything.
Yeah, well, that's
except
it.
the Pope. They reordered the Pope.
Yeah, reordered the Pope. Well, there were some that were done for 3-packs, and
Yes.
those were the Kmart ones. And
Yes.
So, you know, this is something that at least within the secondary market, which is my area of expertise, I've been putting out there for over a decade now, that later printings on a lot of these books are actually much harder to get. And I was the first one in America to really push UK printings, because UK printings were typically about 8 or 10% of the print runs. Is that fairly close?
Sounds right.
Yeah. And so UK variants are, I mean, that was a plate change. So those are true variants.
Yes.
And they're actually vastly more collectible and harder to find. You know, somebody comes to me and they say, you know, I've got a complete Spider-Man collection. I'm like, well, girl, that's all well and good, but do you have a complete UK Spider-Man? Okay.
Picky.
Well, then you're going to get me sitting up and taking notice. But, you know, anybody with enough money can put together a complete Spider-Man collection. That just proves you've got wealth. That doesn't prove that you have discerning taste.
Yeah, well, no.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so, all right, and that's just me speaking. And you know, hearing it from you just sort of reinforces that those print runs were indeed much lower. And you know, I've done the same thing with Newsstand, and this, to some extent, is long after your period of time with Marvel and into your time when you were with Valiant and Defiant and Broadway. But the Newsstand became increasingly insignificant as a part of the greater scheme of things.
Well, when I was at Marvel and the direct market fired up and it was doing so great, and the newsstand at that point had become almost break even.
Yeah.
Okay, we turned it around somewhat. I mean, when I came in there, it was losing money. We were losing money on the newsstand, and I think just because the books generally got better, I got all these great creators. I had who's who. I had Archie Goodwin, Louise Simonson, Larry Hama, Denny O'Neil for a while, Al Miller. I had the who's who of comics working there.
Yeah.
And so they did good stuff. And even on the newsstand, the sales picked up to the point where we were making some money, not a vast fortune. So it's largely a break-even business with a little bit of a profit. But I always used to tell these guys, these bozos upstairs, because they would say, well, why do we even bother with this? Let's just go all direct, because that's profitable. And I would say, you want the reasons? Okay. 70,000 outlets. All right? You know, every day somebody walks by a comic stand and they don't care, or a newsstand, and they don't care about Daredevil or anything like that, but they see G.I. Joe.
Yep.
Or Star Wars.
Yep.
And so maybe they read them, and maybe they like them, and maybe then they'll come back and they'll find out who Daredevil is. Or Superman. We didn't even care. We were just trying to save this dying industry. You know, who cares?
Yeah.
But get new people into it. Those kids, those people who went to the newsstands or saw this bait we put out there, eventually, if they pick up G.I. Joe number 13, they want the first 12. Where are you going to go?
Yep.
Comic book shop.
Yep.
Before you know it, those people become comic book shop regulars. So we're actually building the direct market with the 70,000 newsstand outlets. And furthermore, it gave us the volume to get a better CPM, cost per thousand, for our advertising.
Yep.
And so we were able to raise our advertising rates substantially because we had both the direct and the newsstand. And because of the larger volume, we're able to get more money for ads. And so they never factored that in. I said, what about all that? All that revenue is, you know, you'll lose that if you don't have the newsstand.
Right.
And so, P.S. G.I. Joe was our #1 subscription book.
Really?
Yes, by a long shot.
See, when I first got into business, this is before you and I met you know, I was selling comics in '69, but when I opened my first retail store in '74, Conan was our best-selling comic when I first opened up. Barry had left a couple years prior, so that was the John Buscema, Alfredo Alcala Conans. But oh my God, those were huge.
Oh, yeah.
So they outsold Spider-Man 2 to 1.
They always do. Well, it depended on which area of the country and stuff like that. But Savage Sword was among our most profitable books.
Yeah, black and white.
And the color comic did very, very well. So anyway, but little amazing facts there. And I tried to fight to keep the newsstand. The people, after Ed Shukin, the thing was very successful. After Mike Friedrich left, and he got to Carol Kalish. Carol, she was all gung-ho. Yeah, let's forget this newsstand. She wanted to be all direct. I mean, we can speculate about her reasons for that, or I can tell you some that I know, but let's not go there. But at any rate, she wanted the newsstand to close down. I fought to keep it strong. Try to, you know, let's do an exclusive for the newsstand.
Yeah.
And she'd say, well, the direct market will be outraged. And I said, fine. They'll all go to the newsstand and they'll buy copies.
Right.
You know, just like
They'll
they
go
did
to an ID wholesaler.
just like they did with that first issue of Thor that Walt did. They underordered it, and we had one of the highest sell-throughs on the newsstand for that book of any book in our history, because so many direct market stores went to the newsstand, bought the copies for retail, went back, sold them for double or whatever, you know, because it was so hot. And so I said, you know, let's do a newsstand exclusive. No. So I never won that fight. But I did get some promotional money. I did get some minor improvements, and we did sell better. And as long as I was at Marvel, I won that fight. After I left, the will to do that eroded, and eventually, I don't remember what year, they went off the newsstand.
Well, not until recently.
Yeah.
And here's the fun part, at least from my perspective, which is toward the end, which I think was about 2014.
Okay.
I was actually going to Barnes & Noble, which was the last newsstand holdout, and I was buying new comics off their rack and paying them cover price, retail, and then bringing them back and marking them up by a factor of 10 because I realized that it was down to 1 or 2% of the print runs.
Well, yeah, but that's, I remember we had to talk about this before, and that's because they weren't servicing most of the ID wholesalers who service newsstands.
Nope.
They were going to bookstores and so forth.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, they did take them off of the 70,000 outlets.
Yes.
Earlier,
Yeah.
and that just was crippling.
Yeah, and it really hurt the comics industry as a whole because it reduced our exposure.
Right.
The only thing that has really saved our exposure in many regards has been the internet, because now everybody can try out a new concept online And we're seeing vast growth here at our store, at least in part because people are getting hooked on comics digitally,
Yeah.
and then realizing that actually paper comics are superior to,
Yes.
to digital comics. They never yet have come up with a technology. And I don't think that they ever will. I think there's something about the feeling of comics.